Okay. All right. So here we are in Brooklyn, New York, at the residence of Bernice and Sanford Schwaber. The date is Sunday, August 15th, 1999. And we're conducting an interview with Uncle Sanford about his childhood and his war experiences. And I'm going to ask some questions and give the floor over to Sanford. Okay, so Sanford, I always start with your date of birth and when and your childhood.
Oh, I was born in 1914 in Brooklyn, New York. My parents were Samuel and Gussie Schwaber. I had 5 siblings. My sister Frida was married to Louis Reamer. My sister Rose was married to Ben Blau. My sister Mary was married to Ed Spitzen. And my brother David was married to Bessie Betty Golding. And I was privileged to be married to Buddy Springsteen.
Okay, so before we get to your marriage, growing up, where did you grew up in the neighborhood of Williamsburg?
I was born in Williamsburg, grew up there, went to school, public school, and my brother Dave was my mentor. There was a difference of 13 years in our age, and David was a great help to me in my education. Also, Dave was one who bought me skates and a baseball glove. And also, I was fond in stamps, and he would purchase postage stamps for me. And this was my big brother.
Okay. And so you went to public school, and you went to public high school as well?
I went to high school, right, and then I went to 2 years to Polytechnical Institute, studying for electrical engineering. And then positions were hard for Jewish fellows to get into the electrical field. And so eventually I left college and went on into the business world. And before long, the Army came along, and I was drafted into the Army. And when I came through the Army, I went back into the business world and eventually went into business for myself. I was in business for 42 years and then sold the business and retired. You want my experiences during the war years?
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. I just want to know if you can tell us any anecdotes that come to mind about childhood with Dave, growing up with in the same house with Grandpa Dave.
Well, I can think of a few funny things. I remember that when Shabbos came along, right after Mariv, Dave was getting busy to go on his date with Bess. And one of the big jobs I had was going to the Chinese laundry to get his stiff shirt and collar out for him. And so that I would get a nickel for doing that type of job. Dave was also very fond in going after wherever there was a big fire. And wherever there were engines running, he would take me along to see some fires. And those are the highlights that I can remember. I also remember him with his bright red hair, which everybody called him Red. And that's about it. As time grew on, we both got a little older. Eventually Dave got married, Dave had a family, and I had my family.
Okay.
That's it.
So what year did you get married?
1940.
1940 you were married, at the age of?
26 years.
26, okay. You married Bernice, and you were both living in Brooklyn.
Yes, right.
Okay. And the war broke out, well, war was declared in 1941, in December 1941.
Right.
And when were you drafted?
In September of 1943.
Okay, so between the time you were married and the time that you were drafted, you were working.
I was working then.
You were living here. You were living in Brooklyn.
I was in Brooklyn then, right.
Okay, and you were working in business.
That's right.
And already in Tasty Cakes, or?
No, I was working for a company that manufactured baker supplies, ingredients for the food industry. And eventually I worked my way up to become sales manager of the organization.
So at the time of the draft, what was your position?
I was a sales
You were
manager.
sales manager. Were you expecting to get drafted?
Yes, because the draft was on, the draft started in 1941, and eventually I knew I would be called because they were calling up everybody at that time.
And you were 29 at the time.
Right.
Okay. So from the time you were drafted, you got the notice. How much time did you have to prepare?
Well, from the time the draft board gave me the notice, they actually gave me 30 days. That was all. I asked for more time, but they would not extend the length of time. The government was in need of military men, and there was no exceptions. I had to go.
So this
I had to put my things into storage, send Bernice back to her family
where?
here in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was off to basic training.
And that was what month that you were left to basic training?
In September, the latter part of September 23rd.
Okay. And where did you go? Where was your first stop?
Well, September 23rd, I left on a train that took us to Camp Yaphank, which was Camp Upton in Long Island. And there I was trained there, I would say maybe about 3 or 4 weeks, and then shipped to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. North Carolina, I was trained in the artillery on the 105 howitzers, tractor drawn, and I remained there until, I would say about December of 43.
So the initial training in Long Island was just basic training?
Basic
how to
training,
handle a weapon?
just introductory to it, very little. It was just a matter of about 3 weeks.
And
Then I was shipped to Fort Bragg.
did you have any say in terms of where you would go, whether you'd be Army or Navy or?
No, we went through a classification board, and some of them would send the men to Navy, but as my sheet came along, more automatically they said, they stamped it Army, Selective Service Army.
Okay.
And that's where I wound up in the artillery at Fort Bragg.
Okay, so how many months were you at Fort Bragg?
From, I just recollect now, I would say from 43 all the way through until just about March of 44.
March of 44. And your training was as a gunner on a howitzer?
That's right.
Okay. How many people were in a squad? How many people manned a howitzer?
Eight people on that. Right.
You were the rank of private?
Private.
And so how is the squad built? You were a squad?
We were squad, yeah, right. There were batteries formed in battery formations, but I remember, vividly, there were 8 men on this howitzer, loading the shells and so on. In fact, we had a drill sergeant who was from World War I in his late 40s, who had been in the cavalry, and he treated us as if we were horses. When he would, instead of telling us to stop or something, he would say, "Whoa, halt," as if we were animals. And so one Friday night, we were pushing a howitzer up a hill in the mud, sliding down with it, and he would yell, "Whoa," to halt, and we kept going. And as a result, the next day he made us run around the track field with full pack ice until we dropped.
So who was in command of the howitzer out in the field? Was there
This is still basic training.
I understand, but
yeah, we had a first sergeant that would direct, I think, about 3 or 4 batteries on that.
I see.
On that.
And eight men manned each gun.
Right.
I see. And a battery was consisted of how many guns?
We have a battery would be about 4 guns at that
4
time.
guns.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this was all under the command of one sergeant.
Right.
Okay. So you were there until about March of 44, and then what happened in March of 44?
March of 44, they started preparing me for a shipment overseas. At that time, I had no idea where I was going, whether I'd go to the Far East or to the European Theater of Operations. And I was besides myself because I know I was going to be shipped. Eventually, they sent me to Fort Meade, Maryland. And at Fort Meade, Maryland, I had some relatives. Putney Road was near Baltimore, and I had relatives that were in Baltimore. And I called them on the phone and told them I had just arrived, and that the first opportunity I had, I would go to visit them.
These are the Baltimore Schwabers,
Right.
With Montes and
Yes,
Stanley.
exactly.
And did you know them growing up?
Yes, I did. In fact, the one I called was Montes, Milton Schwaber. I called him and told him I would visit his parents, see, which is, his father was my father's brother. See. And so I had only been in the camp about 2 days when a corporal ordered me to report to the first sergeant. I went to the first sergeant and he said, who do you think you are, Soldier Schwaber, that you demand to go to a Passover services when you just arrived here? I says, I didn't make any request. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, he says, we got an order from the general that you're to report to a Passover Seder at your uncle's home. I says, that's news to me. So he says, well, your cousin by the name of Milton Schwaber called the general and made a request. He says, now, I want you to shine your shoes, polish up, and report back to me on a double, which I did. I said, and before I knew it, I was escorted into a Jeep with an MP, and I was delivered to my uncle's home.
And your cousin Max, he was older than you?
Yeah, he was there with his brothers. There were David Schwaber, and there was a Milton, and there was Joe, and there was Nathan, and they had 2 sisters, Dora and Jenny, with their husbands and with their children. Joe and Nathan were also in the Army, stationed at Fort Meade. And they must have brought to that Seder approximately about 60 people, friends of theirs, to attend. I had never seen a Seder with so many people. And my Uncle Joe made me sit at the head of the table with him.
You were in uniform?
I was in uniform, and they were all in uniform. It looked like an Army Seder. So, and then when we were through, I was told by the sergeant to be back by midnight, but I made sure to be there before time, back at camp. So that was my experience at Fort Meade. A few days later, I was shipped to Camp Taunton near Boston. That was the port of embarkation. So I knew from there, evidently, I was going to Europe.
Taunton, I guess, right?
Yeah, Taunton.
Yeah. And in between the time that you were drafted and the time you arrived in Boston, were you able to get back to Brooklyn and see Bernice at all?
This is what happened, yes. Only not too much time, but I had one experience. While at Camp Taunton, I was given a 24-hour pass to go home. I knew within about 2 or 3 days I would be shipped. And coming back on the train, coming back to New York, I became depressed, knowing where I was being shipped. And I couldn't go home and tell Bernice or tell my parents that I was being shipped. So instead I went to my brother David's home in Borough Park. And there I broke down. And they took me to a doctor. Doctor took one look at me and he said, I know what your problem is. You have gangplank fever. And he gave me an injection, and the next thing I knew, I felt a little better, and I got on a train and went back to camp.
So you never saw Bernice?
Never saw Bernice, never did.
You didn't even know you were having to leave?
No, never did. Then I was put on, a couple of days later, I went on board the old Manhattan liner. It was a converted cruise ship, old Manhattan luxury liner. As a troop ship carrying 3,500 men. Excuse me. We took, it was 6 days crossing, 2 days along the coastline, going up to Iceland, where we were escorted by American ships and Canadian ships. 2 days we were on the ocean alone, concerned about subs. And 2 days before we came into England, the English planes came out and got us in, and it landed into Liverpool on May the 11th, 1944.
And you had no idea, nobody had any idea that the plans for an invasion of the continent were afoot?
Well, we knew something was taking place. Exactly when, we had no idea. Then I was sent to a replacement camp.
What they call a Rebel Depot?
Rebel Depot. That
Yeah.
time they called it replacement center.
Mhm.
And I was there for a couple of days when,
Thank you. If you want me to pause at any point, let me know.
No. I was at the replacement center for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden they called my name out. A few others were called, and they started shifting the men, some into infantry, some into artillery. And I had no idea. They put me on board a truck, and the next thing I knew, I wound into a place called Newbury, England, where the 101st Airborne was based.
That was your first encounter with the 101st Airborne. You didn't know that you would belong to them?
Nothing whatsoever, you see. But I was besides myself, because I said to myself, they're all paratroopers. I was never in a plane. I don't even know what's happening, you know. But then soon enough I found out that I was in the glider units. And within about a week later, we were all taken to marshalling areas where we were closed in, no one could go out, no one could leave. MPs were on the outside guarding the area because they were getting ready for the invasion at that time. And they had tents lined up, and you go into the tent, there were tables there where each parachute would land, where the gliders would land, and so on and so forth. And then I'd say around June the 1st, I was taken out of there and brought back to Reading. I was being used as a replacement for those going in. In other words, I did not go in on D-Day.
Nobody knew then that D-Day
Right.
was imminent.
No, see. But then we knew on June the 3rd, we were told that the Pathfinders were being dropped. See, that's why everybody's closed in the marshalling area, closed in. So no information will be given out. Pathfinders, they dropped them down at night.
These are the first paratroopers to land,
Right.
to guide the way for the
Approximately about 500, right, that landed at night, and the French underground helped them hide, so that on June the 5th, then they knew that they would be going in, not the 6th, but on the 5th, the 101st was going in to be dropped in that night, at 10 o'clock that night, see. And I was stationed in Reading at an ammunition dump, guarding that. And the first wave went in at 5 o'clock at night, so that the Pathfinders lit up the area where
5 p.m. or 5 a.m.?
5 a.m.
On the morning of...
No, wait. They went in at 5 o'clock on June the 5th at 10 o'clock p.m.
At night?
At night. At night.
In other
This
words,
was
2
the
days
drop.
after the Pathfinders?
Right,
Okay.
right, see. And approximately about 1,500 men were the first group, that first wave that went in. Then in the morning on the 6th, they dropped about 2,000 more. The whole division did not go in at one time.
Okay. Now, did you have training in a glider? Did you have any kind of practice runs in a glider beforehand?
Nothing, absolutely nothing at all.
All you were doing was on your howitzer. You were training with your howitzer.
Right, with the howitzers, that's all.
Okay.
That's all.
And you were told that you were going to be dropped in with the howitzer, the glider, and you were
Right.
expected to operate it.
Right, exactly.
Did you had a unit? You had your 8-man unit around the same gun that you were training
yes,
together?
everything, right. Now, what happened was this. When we got to England, we were no more on the 105 howitzers. They were too heavy for the gliders. We were trained on 57 millimeter guns, British type guns that were lightweight, armor piercing. They had armor piercing shells. But the same batting crews were still on the same type of gun. So what happened was this. Then on the 6th, when they dropped them in, early hours, they dropped them in on the 5th and on the 6th. In other words, it was at June the 5th at 10 o'clock at night, about 1,500 to 2,000 men were dropped in then. And the next morning, again, they dropped in parts of the element of the division.
Just by parachute or also
Parachute.
not by gliders yet?
No, not by gliders. Gliders came in that same day, June the 6th, but a little later. The idea was that the paratroopers would clear the area where the gliders could come in,
Okay.
you see?
So this was over an area around Omaha Beach? Was 101st?
Utah Beach.
Oh, Utah
We came
Beach.
to Utah Beach.
Okay.
We were at the Schwaber Peninsula.
Okay. Now, I guess the two divisions that came in then were the 101st and the 82nd.
82nd went to another area. 82nd went in more inland to St. Mary Greece. That's where they went.
Mhm.
See, we had to secure the Schwaber Peninsula.
Okay.
That's it.
So that was the mission of the 101st Airborne,
Yeah.
to secure the Schwaber Peninsula.
Peninsula, right.
Okay, and that was the area that where the landing
That was
was
for
going to come
Utah,
from
where
Utah
the Utah
Beach.
could come in, right.
Okay. So about 2,000 or so soldiers were on land already by the time the major wave of the
Right,
invasion
we're
came in
coming
on June
right,
6th.
right. And then they started right that same day, the second or third wave came in. Then the next day they sent more gliders in, you follow me? And I came in on the fifth day by boat. That's when the whole rear echelon of the division came in.
Now, by that, were you apprised already on June 6th of what had happened? That
Oh, yeah,
the
we knew.
continent was invaded?
Oh, we knew already, yeah, sure.
When did you find out? When did you first find out about the big invasion that was happening?
Oh, we knew it on the 5th because we saw the whole formation. They loaded up that night. And then, we saw them going over.
So you saw it, so you figured, but nobody ever told you.
No, no one told us, no.
And so, and how long before your assignment to go in on D-Day plus 5?
Right.
How long before that did you know that was going to be what you were going to have to do?
What do you mean by
I mean,
that?
how much time in advance did they say, okay, you're going in today on the glider?
Oh, probably the same day.
Okay.
The same day. They loaded us on a boat, took us off, and crossed the English Channel.
Okay.
Sure.
So you came over not on a glider, but on a boat.
On a boat, right.
You had to, one of the landing craft.
And then he
I
craft,
guess they were
right.
called the DK.
Huey something, named after some guy who made them, I forgot who made them.
All right, and you had to get off and wade ashore, right?
Wade ashore,
Wade ashore on
right,
Utah
right,
Beach.
yeah.
Utah Beach was already secured.
Yeah, right.
And what did you do? What was your?
Well, then by that time, we were together, the whole division. Approximately, the division was supposed to be about 10,000 men. But when we came in, the rear echelon, we were replacements already for those that had been killed or wounded already, you see? And so we came in, and there was a lot of fierce fighting there because we had to secure the whole peninsula over there so that other infantry outfits would be coming in. You follow me?
Was there a port at Cherbourg?
There was a landing place there.
So what? You were attached to the 101st Airborne Division.
No, I wasn't attached. That was in the division.
You were in the 101st Airborne Division.
Right.
And then what? You were part of a glider battalion.
The glider division, they call it.
There's a glider
The
division.
regiments were the paratroopers,
Right.
and the battalions were the gliders.
So you were in a glider battalion.
Right,
Do you remember
right.
what number?
81st Battalion.
The 81st Glider Battalion.
E Battery.
E battery. A battery, I guess, is approximate to a company.
More or less, I would say that in the batteries we had about 600 men. You know,
Okay.
like I say, in other words, like the 81st Battalion, the battalion was about 600.
600 men. So a
And we
battalion.
divided
That's
in with, and then it was 6 batteries with a headquarter.
okay.
See?
Fine. So you were attached to which battery? The
I was an E Battery.
E battery.
Right.
And E battery was commanded by a captain.
We had a captain, right?
Okay.
Right.
And then
But the whole battalion was in control. I had a lieutenant colonel. Some of them had a full colonel.
okay. And so you were divided into batteries, and then the batteries were commanded by a captain.
Right.
And then did you have platoons? The
yeah.
subdivision of the battery was a
Sure,
platoon,
sure,
which was a lieutenant or a second
Right.
lieutenant in command.
Second lieutenants, yeah, first lieutenants, second lieutenants.
Do you remember
In
what?
fact, basically,
Okay, so you were telling me about the way it was divided. So from the battery then was divided into platoons,
that was right.
and then the platoons into squads.
Right.
Okay. And the sergeants would command at the squad level.
Right.
Okay.
And we never received replacements of lieutenants because our first sergeants got battlefield promotions.
Because officers were being killed.
Right.
I see.
That's the way it went up the line. Another way. So we felt this is our lieutenant who at one time he was our first sergeant.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's a comradeship there, a very close knit. Another thing was that a lot of people, see, our fighting was entirely different than infantry. We were dropped behind the lines, we were always surrounded by Germans when we were dropped in, and we felt that we had to protect each other. There was no way out.
So your first mission was to secure the Cherbourg area.
Schwaber Peninsula. In fact, the Schwaber Peninsula, there was one particular place called Carrollton, which was like the main city in that.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of heavy fighting there. In fact, reports we were getting from the radios was that the Germans were blasting that they had defeated us. The fact it was we had destroyed a German sixth regiment or something like that. This German parachute number 6 regiment or something like that, and they claimed that they had defeated us. And we were listening to this on the radio. They were claiming, and the people, the French underground told us, they said, isn't this something? They're claiming that they still have possession of the land, and here we are. We have taken them prisoners.
Were you already hearing Axis Sally?
Oh yeah, sure, we heard that on the radio. And then that whole area at one time was called Purple Heart Lane because there were so many killed and wounded in there. In other words, when the division has 10,000 men, all 10,000 don't go in. They send in.
Okay, we're back in. So, we're still in France.
We're still in France.
We're still in Normandy. The job of the 101st is to conquer the Cherbourg Peninsula.
Right.
And you're over on D+5. You must have been scared.
Oh, definitely, it's frightening. In fact, at times you felt as if you hoped that if it's going to happen fast. And what concerned me a great deal is when I would see some of these fellas that were tough fellas take out their rosary beads and start crossing themselves and praying. Then I bent down my head and I said my Shema.
Did you feel like you were adequately trained for combat?
Well, yes, more or less, because the basic training was more or less, I mean, don't forget, you went through barbed wire with machine guns firing over your head as you're crawling on your belly. And so you had that experience, good training. And as you lived from day to day, you became a little more adjusted, I say slightly adjusted.
Okay, now you said that you were in the Cherbourg Peninsula in Normandy. They classically described hedgerow fighting. Was there hedgerow fighting around the area where you were?
We had some of it, not that great, that we did have. The ones who really went through the hedgerow in the beginning were those who came in on the 5th and the 6th day. After that, more or less, we were in the clear. We were over the hedgerows already. Beyond that.
And so you would fight, I guess, by day and then dig in at night?
At night, no, the fighting was during the day. It was around the clock. I mean, we didn't stop. I mean, the artillery pounded us. You had plenty going on. See, when I came through already, they had secured a good part because I was rear echelon. They had secured a good part already. All the gliders were all finishing because we came in by boat. It was the rear end of it on that. So everything was secure. In fact, as I mentioned to you before, the German 6th Parachute Regiment had claimed that they had defeated us, and instead it was just reversed. We had defeated them.
And so
there were more prisoners. I think we took more prisoners than actually men that we had.
And what did you do?